Hello, guys, and welcome back to the Glue Guys podcast, episode 17. Lincoln likes to call it the Alexander Zinchenko episode. All right, and we are here with a very, very, very special guest, someone we have tried to get on for really ever since we started. Lincoln Kickbush. Lincoln, why don't you tell the people how you're doing today?
I'm good, man. Appreciate you guys having me on. I'm excited to talk
Awesome. Also, always awesome to show some support to our firefighters out there. Lincoln out there holding it down, saving cats from trees, all that kind of good stuff that you see firefighters do. Chad, how you been doing this week?
Man, I'm good. As we were just kind of talking before the episode, before you hit record, not only is this the Zinchenko episode, this is also the Master P episode. He played like maybe 10 minutes for the Raptors in the preseason in '99 and wore number 17. So, shout out Master P, a guy who I saw was a first ballot Hood Dude Hall of Famer because he was a rapper, ball player, and drug dealer and was famous for all three. So I don't know. We'll see. Let the comments decide. The big three, kind of like us right now.
Exactly. As you can see, everyone else has on their USA gear except for me, so I feel kind of left out. I didn't know. I was going to put on my Christian Pulisic jersey I got when I was 16, but I decided that ripping that live right now would probably not be the greatest decision. But Chad actually wanted to get us kicked off.
Lincoln, I got to ask, who's on the back of the jersey?
It's actually a custom. It's got Kickbush on the back. Yeah.
I should have never doubted my boy. It's not custom. I thought you've won a couple caps already.
Yeah.
Or is that not? Did I read that wrong?
Back in the glory days. Maybe.
In between C and U seasons, he had a couple of friendlies.
Yeah. Yep.
Fair enough.
But
I mean, to be honest, we could have played a lot of people against Jamaica and been okay. So
or
I don't doubt it.
Vega, but we don't have to go there.
Yeah, nah.
Yeah, so actually Tanner used to wear this pink Real Madrid kit that said Dale 9 on the back of it in high school. And so I thought that was a bit aggressive, but what do I know? Chad wanted to get us started with a little mini topic before we hop into our main topic of the national team today. So Chad, why don't you take it away for a couple minutes? Let us know kind of what the topic, the intro topic of the day is going to be.
Yeah, so I'll set the scene. I was, scrolling through TikTok as one does over the weekends.
Getting information in China.
Was watching a video where it was because I wasn't even at home, so we're good. We're okay. They don't got anything. Where it was Derek White and Peyton Pritchard being interviewed, asked who the best teammate they've ever had was, and both of them in 2 seconds said Blake Griffin. So I know, crazy, right? Like very crazy.
When he was on Blake the Celtics. Griffin,
yeah, for the 10 minutes him and Master P played about the same amount.
I always forget he was on the Celtics.
I think he does too. This is the thing. I think he forgets it. But it just kind of took me down a Blake Griffin wormhole, and then I started watching videos about how much money he's made, and so then it took me down another wormhole of, well, who are the highest paid guys? Blake Griffin's got to be in there. And I'm like, damn, he's 17th and he's made $270 million.
All time?
That's crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. So this brings me to the point that I got, you think we did it one time with you called it the Tenables, call it Family Feud, sports, whatever you want to call it. The 10 highest paid guys in NBA history.
Quick community note to this before we get started. Blake Griffin was actually the officiant at Peyton Pritchard's wedding, literally this past summer. So,
yep. I'm thinking he was probably a decent teammate. If he was the officiant of the wedding.
Okay.
So we're doing top 10 highest paid guys of all time. I want this to be a joint effort. I want this to be Lincoln, Andy. I don't know if you guys want to kind of go 1v1 or
career earnings.
Career earnings
only from the NBA.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll give a major hint. 7 of the guys are active players.
Yeah, they all have to be recent because they weren't making a ton of money before now.
Yep.
All right. So, I mean, LeBron has to be in there.
I would say Curry's got to be in there as well.
Both LeBron number 1, 479 million.
No.
Curry number 3, 389 million. So you guys
KD.
are off to a good start. KD number 2, 396 million.
I'm trying to think of guys that have gotten like 3 maxes since that 2016 media rights deal.
Harden is up there, number 6 at 337 million.
Is it crazy to say Giannis is in there?
Yes, it is. It is because he just missed out. If you remember when he first signed with Milwaukee, after his rookie deal, he actually took a bit less than the max. He only signed for 4 for 100, so that kind of hurts him. Yeah, I know, right?
Damn,
only 100.
Yeah, so Kobe's got to be in there.
Yeah, yep. Kobe's 8, 323 million. So far, just to give a recap, you guys have LeBron James at 1, Kevin Durant at 2, Steph Curry at 4, James Harden at 6, and Kobe Bryant at 8. So you guys have gotten 5. You have 5 left.
Who'd be like 3?
I know. Like, I'm trying to think of like that old core that's like kind of getting phased out, but isn't quite out yet. Like people are like, Kawhi.
No, unfortunately, Kawhi Leonard not on the list. Who?
Westbrook.
Yes, Westbrook is there. Number 5, 340 million. So you guys have gotten 6.
I say I'm trying to think of current play. I mean, like, I don't. Go on.
Is 3 a current player?
Paul George.
Paul George.
No, but he is 9th.
Yeah. I say the dude Paul George gets a new max every summer. I swear. So.
305 million for Paul George. Kyrie, unfortunately, not on it. He's another one of those where, like, you look at his contracts and they've been weird because it's like
everyone knows he's an insane person.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, as good as he is on the court, no one wants to trust him and give him more than like 2 years at a time. So
forgot about his.
He probably
his
he could have been on there.
God, who's got multiple maxes? Or like just played a shit ton of years? Like Dirk isn't in there.
No. So you guys have
3 more.
Go ahead, Lincoln. Yeah,
I feel
3
like the
more.
Sixers had to have given something like I don't want to say Tobias Harris, but they
It's crazy that Harris is even in consideration, but thankfully he's not in the top 10.
Okay, good.
I mean, is Embiid in there?
No Embiid. So I will say these earnings were as of July 2024. So basically from at the end of last season at that point. So you guys have 1 more active guy and then 2 retired guys left to get.
All right. So who's just gotten a shit ton of maxes?
I'm trying to think like previous MVPs.
Is that a good line of thinking?
Actually, I mean, I didn't even think about it, but yeah, a couple of these guys have definitely won MVPs. That's for sure.
So either guys that retired. Oh, Shaq.
Shaq is in there at
KG.
number 10. Kevin Garnett.
Yeah.
Yes, you got the 2 retired guys.
Is Derek Coleman in there?
So you guys have 1. The funny thing is the person left is still number 3 that you guys haven't gotten. He is active, and funnily enough, I mean, he's pretty symbolic with this number, so that might have given it away, but... Number
3? Oh, CP... Oh, yeah, Chris Paul. Yeah, that's bad. That was a bad beat from us. The thing is, I didn't think about him because I always think of him just being like... I mean, I don't really remember reading the... Chris Paul signs a 3-year, $150 million deal with the Los Angeles Clippers. Like that's not a headline that really sticks in my memory. But he's also has been in like the league for 20 years, so.
You're absolutely right. The thing is, the Phoenix contract is what helps him out because it's like he got the deal from New Orleans. Obviously, he gets the Clippers extension, and then it's like, oh, by the way, when he's 34 or 35, he got 4 years and 160 from Phoenix.
That's outrageous. I mean, this dude's about to turn 40 at the end of this year.
He's
like 6 feet tall.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say.
Yeah. I think I would
Tall
actually
guy.
back Lincoln's I would honestly back Lincoln's athleticism compared to Chris Paul. No lie, I've seen him. I've seen him on a basketball court before.
Back in the intramural days, maybe.
Hey, I
Yeah.
heard the intramural team went winless this past year, Link.
Yeah. It's all social media based now. They care more about the Instagram than they do the wins.
It's because they lost Killian, that's why. Ever since they lost Killian, they don't have that big man.
They lost the dynamic duo coaching staff, you and I.
When Lincoln was player coach for a little bit, that was an interesting time for the team.
I think the low point of athletics, just period, that I've seen was Justin Wilson checking into a game.
This dude threw up a jumper with one hand that hit the ground. Like before the basket. I didn't even know that was possible.
Yeah, that was rough.
Yeah, so that was very interesting. I mean, I always like doing like little lists like that. I mean, lists like Sporkle and people do the immaculate. Me and Lincoln used to cheat at the immaculate grid all the time and stuff like that. And so those are always really fun. So I always like doing lists like that. It also shows you how little ball knowledge you have compared to what you think. Because like all those names should be like literally like in theory should be like 10 of the top like 15 names off the top of your head, but sometimes they're just not. Sometimes now the cookie crumbles.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get moved on to the main topic of the day. Obviously, by the attire that the other two are wearing, you can tell that we are going to be talking about some U.S. men's national team. All right. Now, this is kind of the beginning of a new era, but also we are looking towards USA 2026 or whatever, North America 2026, whatever you want to call it. I'm calling it US 2026 because,
Pretty much every game is in the U.S.
Exactly. And all the important games, aka the knockout games, are in the US.
Yep.
So we are almost exactly a year and a half out, about a year and 7 months. So just want to start off with just a little bit of groundwork about Poch, okay? Mauricio Pochettino, the new United States national team manager. So far, he has managed 4 games. 2 have been friendlies, 2 have been competitive games in the Nations League. He started with a 2-0 win against Panama, a little revenge game for the Copa America. Then had a 2-0 loss in Mexico, which it's a friendly, but you still never want to lose to Mexico. And so 2-0 is kind of stuck out a little bit. But then he responded with a big 1-0 win in Jamaica, tough place to go, and then a 4-2 home win against Jamaica. So, Lincoln, so far, me and you text all the time about the national team. What are we feeling about Poch himself and sort of what he has done to either improve or change the team, or just stuff that you immediately notice is different with him?
Yeah, I mean, going back to the results, like, I'm not worried about that Mexico loss. I mean, we've never won in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
It's the second game that he's ever coached. I'm excited. I mean, he's proven himself as a top coach in Europe. And I think that just the level that he brings, the respect that he brings, I mean, guys have to look up to him, especially like guys who've maybe played in MLS most of their career or played in smaller European clubs. It's the biggest name since Jurgen Klinsmann we've had at the head coaching position. So I'm super excited. I think that hopefully he'll be a little better than our previous coach. Yeah, so it's I think it's a big step in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree. That pedigree that he has, I mean, especially with all those trophies he won at Spurs, I think he's no, but all jokes aside though, like managing in like La Liga and multiple teams in the Premier League, managing PSG, managing clubs like that, I think just kind of brings a little bit more of like a presence when, someone comes in and is like, hey, I managed Neymar, or I managed Harry Kane or Heung-min Son, like I don't have to, like, you're Tim Weah, bro. Like that kind of a thing. Yeah. It kind of allows people to sort of take a look back at themselves. And I know we don't, especially me and Chad, like to joke on people for like judging teams off social media, the things that, people publish on social media. But like that first session when he's doing the possession drill, it's like if you lose the ball, you run, like that kind of a thing. So like bringing, I guess, more of that accountability and him being able to enforce it because everyone's like, shit, I mean, this dude has been managing in Europe forever versus, Greg, who was like an all right national team player and then had really only been coaching in the United States, brings a little bit different edge to it. Chad, I know you don't keep up with it as much as me and Lincoln do, but I know for a fact that you did a lot of good research before this. What and of course you like watching the national team. You want to see the national team do well. So what do you think is what do you think is something that the United States has either struggled with recently or has always struggled with that you think a manager like Poch will be able to sort of bring to the side?
Well, I'm going to do what I do best. I'm going to completely divert from your question and kind of follow up on what Lincoln was talking about and, kind of what you're asking, sticking with the theme of Poch and what we're actually getting. The thing that I do like about him, even though, as a club manager, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of Pochettino, because I think he's just had a history of kind of falling out with higher level management at a lot of different clubs that he's been at. But I think the thing that's great about him is he has experience at a bunch of different levels. Exactly like what you said. He's managed, in Spain, in England, in France. Obviously, managing PSG is not quite the same as managing Lyon or something like that, but has managed in France. And has managed all different levels of teams. Like we said, the super team at PSG, which, probably not the best review, but it's an experience that he had. Managed a team with unrealistic expectations compared to the squad they had in Chelsea. Managed a team that, was not a smaller side, but was in that big group, but was the smallest of the teams in the top, which was Tottenham, which I got to say, I think the Tottenham experience is probably the best experience he could have for this job because I think the U.S. kind of is similar, where fans, pundits, a lot of people kind of have this irrational idea of, and I know I'm jumping around because we're going to get to this at some point, but this irrational idea of what the U.S. is supposed to be and saying, man, they just need to make a tweak here and a tweak there and they could make a quarterfinal, semifinal regularly. And, when we kind of go over the squad and the team, I don't know if we necessarily have the players to back that. So Poch will be able to get the most out of the resources that he has available to him. That's something he proved at Tottenham, something he proved at Southampton. I'm like Lincoln. I'm pretty excited about it. This is easily the best coach we've ever had. I feel like each of probably for all three of us since we've been growing up, and I know you two follow it a lot more than me, but almost every coaching cycle we've been through, it's always been like, oh man, this coach is just fucking horrible. Like, this is just the worst coach of all time. Like, Berhalter, oh my God, he's the worst. Who was the Klinsmann? Oh my God, Klinsmann's the worst.
By the end, yeah.
Bob Bradley, oh my God, Bradley's the worst. He should never manage. He can't even manage a Sunday league team after this.
When he got the Swansea job a couple years ago, I was a bit worried for him. But kind of to piggyback off of one of the points that you made that you kind of put forth as a negative, but I kind of see as a positive, was you said him falling out with higher ups in clubs, especially as we saw very publicly with Chelsea recently. I think that's a positive thing for the United States because I think our track record recently has showed that, I'm going to say this as delicately as I possibly can, that we make decisions based on things outside of just soccer. U.S. soccer has shown that they will make decisions outside of what's best for the teams. Yeah, beyond just the men's national team, for the youth teams or for the women's team. They will make decisions based on how will this make us look? How can we present ourselves to everyone else rather than what do we need to do to put a competitive team or the best possible team on the field for each of these age groups, both men's and women's, especially all culminating in the two senior teams. And so I think him coming in, I wasn't really old enough to recognize at the time, but from what I've read since then, apparently that was one of the things that Jurgen Klinsmann was really, really good at, was, going to these higher ups in U.S. soccer and be like, hey, we need to be hunting dual nationals. We need to be playing this brand of soccer. We need people to be going and playing in Europe. And if you've ever watched the Kickin' It series on like CBS Sports on YouTube, Clint talks about it all the time, and when they had Jurgen on, he talks about it. He's like, man, we need these guys to be playing competitive soccer. Even if you look at our roster now, you look at the guys that are still playing in MLS, you're like looking at a Patrick Schulte, the goalkeeper, and you're like, hey man, if you want to get a call up, like if you want to be the number one, find a place in Europe and you can get some minutes, prove you can do it there, then you'll play. Guys like Miles Robinson, who me and Lincoln were super, super high on just before he tore his Achilles, was it?
Yeah.
I think. It's like, hey man, if you want to be a regular, go find a team in Europe to play for that you're playing for regularly. All these people and because you see the guys that are making the biggest impact in the team right now, ever since Poch came in, those are the guys playing in Europe. I mean, Joe Scally has played a ton. Anthony Robinson, obviously. Chris Richards, Yunus Musa, Weston McKennie. Yeah, all those guys. Ricardo Pepi has been killing it this year at PSV, and obviously Christian Pulisic is always going to be killing it because he's our best player. So those are the guys that are making the best impact, and it just so happens that those are the guys that are playing in Europe. Who would have thought? You got to, like Clint said on that kick, in order to be the best, you have to play against the best week in, week out. And even he said, it could be even better to make like 20 appearances in the Premier League than play play every single game in MLS, because you're competing also. Like, it's building up that mental side of your game and that physical side of your game that will sort of challenge you a little bit more. Now, Lincoln, we had a little bit of a love fest to start, but what are your concerns now with Pochettino at this point? Maybe either in the future or, what he could do with players, or, do you have a specific thing that you're like, or maybe it's something that, we've said this all before and he could just be another one of those guys?
Yeah, I don't know if I have specific concerns about Poch himself specifically. I mean, obviously, the lack of trophies, I think, is definitely a concern. And I think we kind of saw this with Klinsmann. I think that Klinsmann kind of got booted out the door because he brought up some issues that he saw within U.S. soccer. And he was, a coach from overseas, and he kind of got – I never thought we should have fired him, to be honest. When they fired him, I was, we got played Bruce Arena.
Yep.
That obviously did not work out. And I'm more, it's kind of a concern more so coming from the top that Poch might butt heads kind of with the people in front of him or ahead of him, and then he might get, backlash from them. But I have faith that they've learned from the past experience that that's not going to happen. As far as issues with Poch, I don't see any off the top of my head. I can't think of any off the top of my head.
Yeah. That's an interesting part. I know we've kind of already talked about it a little bit, but that U.S. soccer point is like, what is it going to take really for the United States to look at themselves and like kind of throw away all their previous biases or previous thoughts? Because, we as U.S. soccer fans thought that the 2018 debacle, not making the 2018 World Cup, was going to allow them to just tear the whole thing down and be like, all right, we need to start from scratch and just start over. But obviously that hasn't truly happened. I mean, I definitely think we're in a better place right now than we were in 2017 when we lost that game in Trinidad. There's no doubt about that. But I think a lot of that can be chalked down to the players that we have now rather than like the system has changed so much. And I mean, and to be 100% fair, U.S. soccer does deserve some credit for that, putting in player development systems to where we can get guys like Weston McKennie and Christian Pulisic and, Tyler Adams and Brendan Aronson and those kind of guys. I get that. But at the same time, it seems like those sort of political top-down issues still exist within U.S. soccer. Now, Chad, I'm going to ask you the immortal question that everybody has asked a million times now, even was asked the last World Cup. What is the actual true fair expectation for the United States at the 2026 World Cup?
Great question. I'll actually answer this one. To me, I think with the stage the U.S. is at right now, if we're able to get out of the group, that should be a realistic expectation for us every single time. And just like in any other major tournament, it's impossible to predict after that. and I'm going to give you the reason why. You have no idea who you're going to go up, who you're going to be drawn up against when it comes to a big game. So on the surface, if I were to say, I'm looking for an example from the last World Cup that fits what I'm trying to say. Maybe if you bring up, I got my notes here. If you were to say, oh, the Netherlands, or perfect example, England losing in a quarterfinal at the last World Cup, that would have been a disappointment in general for England fans.
Right.
However, when you say, well, you lost to France, who most people thought of as either the favorite or second favorite in the entire tournament, so you can't really be too mad about that. That's a situation where, yes, on the surface they lost, and you can spin it either way. Hey, we lost in the quarterfinals, or hey, we lost to the best team in the world at the tournament. So, something like that. So that's why I say getting out of the group is obviously the biggest thing. And then at that point, it's matchup driven. Could I see a situation where we're able to get out of a round of 16 and make a quarterfinal? Absolutely. Because there's usually always between 1 and 3 teams that are like, how'd this team make it to the knockout round? Mm-hmm. A team that every big team is licking their chops waiting to play.
The Australia, the South Korea, the Senegal, that type of...
Yeah.
I mean, funnily enough, Russia in 2018, and then Russia ended up beating Spain in that round of 16 matchup. But somewhere like that, because there's going to be a big team or two that doesn't end up making the knockout stage. Like a Germany recently or something like that. But there's also going to be that team that everyone wants to play. So as long as we're not in the position where we're that team everyone wants to play, I think that could also be considered a win for us. Link, I did want to ask you a question because we were talking about, the roster and Poch being, obviously a European-based coach. How do you feel like this kind of affects the chances of some MLS guys getting call-ups, or maybe the development of the MLS? I feel like there's always a big political struggle for some of the quote-unquote smaller soccer countries, where it's like if the guys in their main league aren't the basis of the team, there are issues. How do you feel about that?
I was always a big MLS supporter.
Right.
Ethan knows that very well. I think you have to be playing in Europe now. The only position I would say you don't have to be playing in Europe is goalie. And I've had this conversation with Ethan before. I would rather have, we see issues with Matt Turner, who's at Palace now, hasn't played a single game this year, compared to someone like Patrick Schulte, who's playing every single week, full 90 minutes. Obviously he's a goalie, so he's going to play full 90. I would rather have a guy who's playing every week in MLS than a guy who's maybe on loan to Crystal Palace or whatever, not playing at all. And
right,
because I think there's nothing you can do in training that can replicate a true actual game that you're playing between the sticks. As far as the other positions, I think you have to be in Europe. I was a big MLS defender. I thought that if you were good enough and you were playing in MLS, so be it. That was also Clint Dempsey was the only player playing overseas when we had, Bob Bradley as our coach, or even Jurgen Klinsmann. Jurgen Klinsmann started Brad Davis against Germany in the World Cup, right? I don't think that we should be starting a Houston Dynamo left mid in the 2026 World Cup. So when you look at the quality of players we have overseas, I don't think that there should be any expectation for players in MLS to get a call. If you're the best player at the position, maybe, but I think all the best players are playing overseas now.
And that kind of brings us to another great point is we've kind of gone through this evolution where maybe early 2000s it was exactly like Lincoln described. Most of our players were playing in MLS, maybe a couple of guys, Dempsey being the headline, maybe a couple of guys who were playing, in Europe or something like that. And then I think maybe in the 2010s, it started to get to the point where it's like, you look up and you're like, shit, we got half of, our entire starting 11 is playing in Europe. Maybe not necessarily starting every game, but they're on the team. Kind of that dilemma that Lincoln was talking about, where it's like, would you rather have someone who plays every game in MLS or someone who is an occasional, a bit part player for a European side? Now, as we get into the 2020s, I feel like we've got a lot of guys where not only are they just on European teams, but I mean, Anthony Robinson, one of the best left backs in the Premier League the past 2 seasons, I would say. Joe Scally, a guy who's been getting consistent minutes for about 2 years for Mönchengladbach. Chris Richards, a guy who's been competing for starting spots and really been, a key part of Oliver Glasner's side when he took over at Crystal Palace last year. Had some injury issues now this season, so hasn't featured quite as much. But even when you get into like some of the, obviously, Pulisic is the star man, and he's found really great form since moving to Milan, which is encouraging, I think. But even you're going Tim Weah, Pepe, Johnny Cardoza's. I mean, shoot, I saw him. He's about to move to Tottenham. So and these are guys that are getting lots of minutes. Weston McKennie has been like somehow on the fringe of leaving Juve every year for the past 3 years, but then ends up playing like the third most minutes in the squad every year.
Yep.
So my point is the level just keeps getting higher and higher. So it brings me to you asking you my question. What do you think the expectations are with this squad and with this team?
So I agree with you. It's kind of silly to be like, if we don't make a quarterfinal, then we had a bad World Cup. Like, if we end up drawing France in the round of 32, then it's like,
yeah, how
can you consider, like, and we lose 2-1 in extra time, or we lose in pens against them, like, oh, that's a shit tournament. There's no way you can say that. My expectation for this World Cup is that we are the best team in a majority of our games. That we are the better team in a majority of our games. And I truly believe that, no matter who we play against. Even if we if we have a group somehow, some way of like Brazil, Nigeria, and I don't know, France or England. I don't care. I want it to be where we definitely know, like, we executed our game plan better than the other team. Maybe not that we beat them, but like, for like in like a game like Brazil, for example, like we drew them 1-1, but they played exactly into our hands. We made a dumb mistake and they scored a goal, something like that, rather than like they completely dominated us. We literally just sat on the edge of our own box. They had 17 shots. We had 1, and they beat us 2-0. The only thing that I want to see really out of this World Cup is something that gets our, and again, this is kind of cliche too, but gets our fans like excited, like to believe in this team again. Because after 2022, it really felt like everyone was kind of against us, which I thought was weird because I thought we had a really, really good group stage in that tournament. But, after the debacle in the round of 16 and then the debacle again in the Copa America, we're really looking again for something to believe in. And for our young players, I mean, what a unique opportunity for like kids that are going to be 8, that like 5 to 10 years old age range that are going to be like, oh my God, I saw Christian Pulisic score this goal against Brazil at home. It was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. And 90,000 fans just stood up all at once, and it was incredible. And we were beating Brazil, and that inspired me to go to the park every single day and become the best player I could possibly be. I think obviously I've never played at the level, but I'd assume every single, national team player that kind of has that story of like, I knew I wanted to be a pro player when I saw this thing, or when this thing happened. Me and you joke all the time about the whole Ronaldinho thing, the original smile type. But, that's legitimately inspiring to a lot of people, where it's like, I can't imagine how many kids in 94, were like, oh my God, I just saw, the national team beat Colombia at home. I was there, that kind of thing. So I just want us to have our game plan executed better than the other team, so that we can really look at ourselves and be like, we're not Brazil, we're not France, we're not England, but we're making the country proud. And I really think at the end of the day, that's what we've done in the past. As much as people like to pretend like, oh, in 2002 we were really good, in 94 we had a really good tournament. It's like, we were not ever going to win any of those tournaments. And for right now, we're still not going to win the tournament. I love Poch coming out and saying, the expectation is always to go and win. I love that. That does need to be the internal expectation being like, we just win the next game. And if you keep winning the next game, eventually you win the tournament. I love that. But, as soccer fans, we need to be realistic about it and say, hey, we're not Brazil. We're not those other countries. But at that same time, I can't say that we can't be Croatia. Like, I look at that Croatia team all the time that got to a World Cup final and then a World Cup semifinal. It's like, that team's not very good. Now, we don't have a unit that's as good as, like, their midfield, and clearly not a player as good as Luka Modric. But there's no reason that Christian Pulisic can't be as good as Luka Modric was in that tournament for a month. There's no reason that he can't have 1 month where he's just like, you know what? In 8 games or 7 games, whatever it is, I'm going to score 3 goals and get 3 assists and just drag us through. There's no reason that can't happen. Because every single World Cup, someone has a tournament that's like Denis Cheryshev, your boy, Real Madrid boy. Perfect example. He had a tournament in the World Cup at Russia where it's like, who the hell is this guy? Is this like the best player in the world? Never heard his name again. Christian Pulisic is way better than Denis Cheryshev, so there's no reason why he can't be like, you know what? Every single game I'm getting a goal or an assist, and we can just go into every game penciling in, hey, we're going to have at least one because Christian's going to do something today. So there's no reason that I don't think that can't happen. Realistically, I want us to just be the better team in at least half our games. But my hope is that we get to at least a quarterfinal.
Kind of piggybacking off of that, I would say our bare minimum is round of 16. We made the round of 16 with Greg Berhalter. We made the round of 16 with Gary Klinsmann. The round of 16 with Bob Bradley. This is the best team we've had, I think, at least in my lifetime, with the best coach we've had. We're going to be playing at home. It could be home games. I think quarterfinals should be the expectation.
Yeah.
This isn't like I know it's a year and a half and change before, so it's somewhat coming up quickly, but it's not like Poch is given 6 months to work with these guys. I mean, he's gonna have Nations League. I don't know when the next Gold Cup is, but he's gonna have plenty of time to work. And I know it's international, so it's different. It's not every single day, but I think the expectation should be quarterfinals. I think that it's tough because, Chad, like you said, you could draw France, you could draw Spain in the first round, and that's going to be a tough game. But I truly believe that if we don't make the quarterfinals, I'm gonna be disappointed regardless unless we win the whole tournament. But like I said before, we haven't had a roster this good in my lifetime. I think this is the best coach we've had. I think we should expect at least to make the quarterfinals.
And kind of, again, like, complimenting that, I mean, look at the young players that we have coming through. Like, guys like Benjamin Kremashi in at Lincoln's favorite club. People like Aiden Morris, who is now coming through into the senior team, kind of graduating from those youth teams. And then, I mean, as much as it kind of sounds like a joke now, I mean, there's no reason that Kevin Sullivan can't play a legitimate role in the 2026 World Cup, because that's how old Christian Pulisic was when we got to that semifinal of the Copa America, and he was our starter. I'm not even asking Kevin Sullivan to be a starter, but there's no reason why he can't, play 10 spot minutes in a couple of games as like a legitimate guy off the bench, because the only part that I think is kind of holding him back actually is that move to City, which kind of sucks because he can't move until he's 18. Yeah. So if he was able to do something similar to Christian, where he was like able to, move to a Dortmund type of club and play in their academy and kind of rise through, or like a Ajax or one of those clubs that's really known for their youth development, I really think he'd be able to do something special for us at 2026. But if again, I don't want to disparage, but MLS, we all know, is not anywhere near the level of those top team or those top European leagues. I mean, look at who won MVP. So
games.
so we know that like young players have been able to come in and make a serious impact. I mean, I know it's not the same as like 2000 or whatever year it was, 2002, but like shit, Freddie Adu scored a couple goals when he was 13 years old in MLS then, so or 14 years old. So there's no reason why Kevin Sullivan can't play a decent amount of games this upcoming year and then become like the starter for Philly Union by the time of the World Cup And then Poch might just shrug his shoulders and be like, hey, let's bring the 17-year-old kid and see if I like him in camp. And then he impresses and he's able to get some minutes.
I feel like the U.S. has had a legacy of taking that one kid or having that one kid who's like, yeah, maybe shouldn't necessarily be on the team, but he's young, so we're gonna take him. Who was the guy that actually
Julian
ended up
Green?
scoring? Yeah,
Yeah.
ended up scoring for us.
He was the next
Was that 14? Is that 2014 against
2014,
the
yeah.
Netherlands?
I forgot who we brought in 2018.
Or
I can't think about it. I can't think of who we brought, which kid we brought in 2018. But
yeah, I don't remember our roster in 2018.
Yeah. So, but then even in 2022, even in 2022, like our whole team was basically just young. I mean, I think Yunus Musa was still like 19 when that tournament started, and he was our
Gio Reyna the same, honestly.
Correct, Gio Reyna, and so there's no reason in 2026 why we don't just be like, hey, talent play. I'd rather have him coming than Paul Areola, playing as our backup right winger.
Fair enough.
The excitement I have with the young players is, I mean, not even these youth guys, but guys who are, like, Gio Reyna's 22. Pepe is 21, 22. Like, these guys are first-team players who are, like, key players and going to be key players when they're going to be 2 years older, obviously, during the World Cup. But it's not like we have an old team. These guys are all young, up and coming, and not even 2026 World Cup, but World Cup after that. We got a lot of young guys who are already playing huge roles in Europe, and they are, I think, going to be good, hopefully, for the next 10 years or so.
Yeah, but don't you think that's a little bit concerning? Because, like, even Gio Reyna is a perfect example. It's like what he was when he was 17 and he just started coming through and playing for the national team and playing for Dortmund. Isn't that the exact same place that he's at right now? Where it's like a lot of what ifs or maybe he could be or that kind of a thing. Whereas he hasn't really taken that step to be like, he's definitely this thing. Like Christian Pulisic went from he could be this thing when he was 17 to by the time he's 24, which is like now basically, he's like, okay, now I can clearly see, he's like 25, 26 now, but you can clearly see what he is now. And throughout that whole time, you could see he was getting better, becoming more regular at his club, obviously stepping up for country. Lincoln finally got convinced by Christian Pulisic. That's how well he did.
I was a hater for a while.
Exactly. So, like, what's the case, like, now if someone is a Reyna hater, what like, unequivocal evidence can you give them to be like, hey, he's this, Chad?
Literally look at Pulisic 2 years ago. This dude was at Chelsea, was not playing, was an afterthought at Chelsea. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I was super locked into his performances for the U.S. in 21-22 time frame. But I know for Chelsea, there was a lot of underwhelming, or it felt like a lot of unfulfilled potential at that moment. And I feel like that's kind of similar to where we're at with Reyna. Now, having unfulfilled potential at a Chelsea for Pulisic is a lot different than having unfulfilled potential at a Dortmund, which is really the club that you kind of go to develop as a young player. Pulisic, prime example of a guy who did that as an American. Now, I still think Reyna has a very high level. Like, I still think he can get to a really high level with this team and be like a really good starter. The problem, though, is like we have a lot of guys in that number 10
come winger type space.
Yeah. Like, honestly, right now, when you look at, you've got Pulisic, McKinney, Reyna, Aronson, Tillman, all as options to play in that spot. And I think Tillman, maybe might be the second best guy out of all of those right now. Like, I've loved what I've seen from him at PSV.
Especially in the Champions League.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The last 18 months especially, like, he has been very good for the U.S. Or not for the U.S., but has been good for PSV. I think that can translate to the U.S., and I think that's a big part of the reason why Poch has kind of played this 4-2-3-1 from what I've seen in the first handful of games is we've got a lot of guys who can potentially be difference makers in that number 10 space, which is something that I think is kind of coming back into the game, where we felt like the number 10 was kind of going extinct for a bit, and now all of a sudden it's making a big resurgence both at the club level and the national team level.
Well, it's changing a little bit because it used to be like your Mesut Ozil, James Rodriguez type, where it was just like, hey, I'm just going to stand in between the midfield and forward line, and you just need to give me the ball, and then I'll start doing stuff. Now it's a lot more dynamic. You're moving into wide spaces. You're pressing. You're still defending a lot. And the change also that a lot of teams have made is that they now defend in a 4-4-2 a lot of times. And so that attacking midfielder kind of serves as like the second forward when you're defending in a 4-4-2. But I think only shit teams defend or play in a 4-4-2 from what I've heard from some of the young players I've talked to. So I don't know, but if you watch literally any Premier League game of all time, every team defends in a 4-4-2, but what do I know? Moving on. I think the only issue I have with the Gio Reyna Christian Pulisic comparison, you make a good point. I mean, in the build up to the World Cup for the United States, Christian Pulisic was not playing well for Chelsea. I think he only scored 1 goal that season for Chelsea, that last season before he moved to AC. The only thing is like, Christian Pulisic clearly showed at Dortmund as a young player. I mean, getting a huge move to Chelsea, and then he scored like 12 his first year at Chelsea. So he clearly showed like a level of like, this is what I am. And then even when he was playing bad at Chelsea, he was like, he can get back to that. Gio Reyna is just a bunch of like, what if? It's like, hey, he scored that sick goal when he was 17 for Dortmund, and he like dribbled past a couple of people for the national team and scored a tap in against Mexico in the Nations League final. And then we think he can be good, but he can't play for Forest, who were freaking horrible last year, and he couldn't get a minute for them basically on loan. And it's just, I feel like his whole career so far has been a big what if. Let me be clear, I want him to be a great player because I know I can see that talent, and everyone can once he starts doing what he's supposed to be doing. Even in the Copa America, we saw when he was actually able to play with 11 men, you know, not with our backs against the wall, then he was able to be fairly productive. But I don't know. I just need to see it on a more consistent basis before I start crowning his ass, like Dennis Green would say.
I am concerned about him because, I mean, I'm looking at the lineup right now against Jamaica, and you have Musa, Pulisic, Weah across like the three for the 4-2-3-1. Weah had a goal, Pulisic had a goal, Musa had an assist. Like, I don't see him, like, even with the U.S., like, he might be the guy coming off the bench. I mean, and this isn't even with Tyler Adams or Tillman. And granted, Tyler Adams is a holding mid type of guy, but Tillman's been killing it with PSV, like you guys said. And it's tough when you look at, I think it's these guys, it's their position to lose. I'm huge on Weah. I love Weah. I love Musa. Obviously, you have to start Pulisic, so I just don't see where Reyna fits in those three guys. So that's so yeah.
Yeah. So
I think.
Go on.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was just gonna say. The only thing that I think he brings is he brings an added bit of creativity that I feel like the U.S. is always needs. You know, like in major tournaments and in the past, and then we would move on because I don't want us to spend 10 minutes debating the 15th best player on the U.S. or anything like that. But I just feel like we've been short when it comes to the goal, both scoring department and goal creation department at major tournaments. So as much as we can get, or any way we can get more creative players out there and more guys who can score, I would like that. But you guys bring up great points. I mean, like, he played 2,000 minutes for Dortmund as a 17-year-old and hasn't played more than 500 minutes in the league since, like, in any year since then. And now he's 21. So, and like you said, I shouldn't be excited that he went on loan to Forest and literally couldn't sniff a game for them.
For a relegation side.
Although to be fair, he did play.
That ain't good.
Well, he did play the same position as the best guy on the team, so maybe I'm a Reyna defender.
Yeah.
But you guys want to actually, we've been teasing it a bit. Can we look at maybe what a potential lineup would look like, maybe for a tournament or something like that? I might be putting you guys on the spot.
So let me have one small point before we start, because this is something I put in my notes as well. I was talking about key issues that we still have. One, I still think goalkeeper is still a big issue. I really love Matt Turner. Obviously, he's an Arsenal legend. He's going to the Arsenal Hall of Fame. But, he hasn't really been getting it done for any club since his move to Europe. So he hasn't been a consistent starter, or obviously really good enough to justify a starting place. So bad that he was brought in the summer by Forest last year and then was replaced by January with, Matt Sells. And so that's pretty damning right there. And then overall depth is also something that we struggle with. So let's try to write something up. Chad, are you gonna be documenting this as we go through it?
Oh yeah, I've got it. I'm ready right now. I think
despite those concerns, I think is this for 2026 or for right now?
You know what? Yeah, we'll just go full on 2026.
Oh shit.
We'll just go full on 2026.
Right.
I think it's going to be pretty similar either way, but okay.
Because it's kind of one of the points that we've been making is the team that we have currently is so young that really the only guys that have been playing recently that you would say aren't going to be in the squad for 2026 would be like Tim Ream. I mean, outside of him, like all these other guys who are playing now are still going to be
in their 20s.
In contention, and quite frankly, Ream shouldn't even be in contention anyway. So.
I mean, you never know. He could still be playing at 40.
I know. I don't know what potion he took to that anti-aging potion. I've never seen a player hit their prime at 36 like him.
Yeah.
But
he played MLS for the Red Bull. He was like at his 20s, and he's started out full with the prep.
My God. Starting in goal, Lincoln, is it crazy for me to say Patrick Schulte is going to be our number one in the U.S.?
I don't think that's crazy at all. I was going to say him or Gaga Slonina. I mean, I'm not sold on Matt Turner anymore.
I'm not sold on Gaga either because he hasn't really played on that top level. He kind of got that move to Chelsea like 2 years ago, and then he's been on loan at like really weird clubs.
Middlesbrough, and so right now.
Yeah, so for me personally right now, I would say Patrick Schulte from Columbus Crew, because I definitely see him probably maybe even this January, because of the way the MLS schedule works, getting a move to Europe, at least if not in this window, then in the summer window.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So we got Patrick Schulte in goal. Now let's move on to that back four, and we're gonna. Do you guys agree to probably stick with the 4-2-3-1 for now, or what do you guys see? Okay, all right, cool. So let's start with the back four.
So the back two and center back,
in a couple.
And center back, I think it's pretty easy. I think it's Austin Trusty and Mark McKenzie.
No Chris Richards back there?
After I saw Austin Trusty be a part of a team that literally conceded 100 goals last year in the Prem, I was convinced. No, for me personally, and I don't know if Lincoln will agree with it 100%, but I would probably lean toward Chris Richards, and if we're thinking 2026, I'd say probably Chris Richards and Miles Robinson. Again, I think Miles Robinson, I could see him being a guy that could get a move to like a lower mid-table European side, whether that be a German team or a English team, because that seems to be the pipeline that the United States has, is either the Germany or the Prem right now. So I could see him moving to one of those sides and really hitting his step. I think he'll be like 29 by then, so he'll be, I guess, the veteran of this back line that we're creating for me.
You don't rate Walker Zimmerman back there for 2026?
After I saw him get walked around for 3 games in Qatar, I haven't been as high as on him since.
Yeah, so Miles Robinson will be 29 in 2026,
which especially for center backs, I believe is pretty prime age.
I would agree with that. I think he's probably the only MLS player that I would put in the starting 11. And he's with got to move to Cincy. I don't know if you guys knew that, but I would agree. Right. Definitely Chris Richards. It's just so hard for me to say no to push Tim Ream out just because he's been so good. And I know I don't know how old he is now, but give me a second.
He right now is 37.
I would go Miles Robinson.
Yeah.
Yes.
I feel like there is always, like, you want to put that one veteran at center back, that consistent performer, but then at the same time, when you look up and you're like, well, shit, this dude's pushing 40.
Yeah.
That's a difficult spot to be in. Okay. So we're going Richards and Robinson as the center back pairing. Fullbacks, I think.
Easy.
I mean, on the left, on the left, Anthony
Oh,
Robinson
yeah.
is nailed on starter. On the right, what are we thinking? Scally's kind of been the more recent performer. Obviously, Dest has been out with the ACL. I've never been a fan of Dest's like club career as far as like fulfilling maybe that potential he had as a 17, 18-year-old at PSV, I think it was. But what about you guys? Where are you leaning with that one?
So this is kind of a little bit of a cop out. If I had to say one, I'd say Dest, but I think it'll be very, very situational. Like if we're coming up against a France team that's going to have like Mbappe on the left, then I think that's a game that Joe Scally's probably going to start at right back. But I think if we're in a game where like, let's say this Gold Cup this upcoming summer, if we bring all our guys, sometimes we treat the Gold Cup kind of weird. If we bring all our guys, like if we're playing against a team we're clearly supposed to dominate, like if we play against like Guadalupe, it's like, yeah, Serginho Dest is going to be the guy because he provides more of that attacking threat, obviously. But even in the World Cup, like if we come up against a team like, I don't want to say any of these teams because then we're going to lose to them and I'm going to look like an idiot. But if we're playing against, like Finland in a World Cup, it's like, okay, yeah, Serginho Dest is going to start so he can have more of that attacking threat. And he's not horrible on-ball defending. Off-ball defending, he's literally the worst player I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah.
But so if I were to say, like, we don't know who we're playing, we're starting one of them, I would say Dest.
I would agree with that. Defending is what concerns me about Dest. You look at what he attack, and I think that like you said, I would go Dest, but I would go Scally there as kind of because I think Scally's. I would trust Scally defensively. I trust Dest.
Yeah.
But I would say either one of those two, for sure.
Fair. All right, so we got Dest. We'll put Dest in there as right back. Now let's move on to the double pivot.
This is very hard.
Looking at
Yeah.
some guys just in contention: Cardoza, Tessman, Tyler Adams, if he ever gets fit, McKinney. Where are you guys leaning? Yeah, De La Torre as well. Where are you guys leaning with that one? Who do you think takes those spots?
I think based on what you just said, in a perfect world, I would want it to be like either Musa and Adams or McKinney and Adams. But since I'm never going to rely on Adams' fitness ever again, I would say Musa and McKinney. Musa's been playing actually more in the 6 for Poch. I think he likes his ability to be able to pick up the ball from deep and drive with it a little bit. McKinney's always shown really good ability to be able to be a box-to-box type of player. So I think that's a good balance between the two. They also both work really hard, so even if they're not great like tacklers and defenders, their work rate kind of is able to overcome some of that stuff. And if we have the correct system where everyone's, working hard defending together, I don't think their lack of like a real destroying ball winner, I don't think that's going to be too big of an issue.
I've always been big on the MMA midfield, McKinney, Musa, Adams. I think if Adams is healthy, he has to be in there. If you look at he's healthy, he's kind of the heart and soul of that midfield. So if he's healthy, I'm going Adams and probably. I mean, you could really go either McKinney or Musa, but I would for sure put Adams. Healthy, but like you said, you can never rely on that good health. He's injured more than he's healthy.
Yeah.
So, if he's injured, I don't hate the idea of McKinney and Musa there and Tillman at attacking mid, but I'm just kind of throwing that out there.
Okay, so we'll pretend we'll go perfect world scenario.
Yeah.
So we're saying, because you got to be optimistic at least right now we got to be optimistic, and I think Adams is started to come back now from whatever his most recent injury was. It's too hard to keep track of.
Which
so
honestly, really
Adams.
quickly, it kind of pisses me off because to me it just more shows than anything that he knew that Greg was going to play him regardless. Because I'm like, obviously that's not how injuries work. You can't just decide like, hey, I'm back from an injury. But like, just for me as a fan, it feels like, so you're telling me you were just hurt for every single club game for 2 years, and now all of a sudden that a new U.S. team coach comes in, you don't get called up. Now all of a sudden you can play games for Bournemouth. Like, screw you, dude.
Yeah. I think that'll be big with Poch coming because there's no expectations for any of these guys anymore. Like, you got to prove yourself. I don't care who you are. I mean, let's not maybe Pulisic. You saw
Yeah.
something out of shape when Berhalter was still the coach because he knew he was going to play.
Yeah.
Guys like Aaron Long was getting basically a guaranteed, Jordan Morris guaranteed World Cup spot. Everyone has to prove themselves. This is kind of off topic from what we're doing, but I think it'll just raise the level with everyone. Everyone's got to prove themselves at the club level and at the international level.
Yeah.
No, that's fair. That's a really good point because I can even tell, just to start this season, McKinney, Pulisic, obviously, Musa, the last month or two for sure. Like, there have been some guys who have definitely raised their game in the past month to two for sure for the U.S. So we got Adams as the nailed on in the double pivot. Do we want to go Musa, McKinney? Like, where are we feeling if we had to pick one?
I think by then, I think Musa will be the guy.
Yeah.
Of those two.
Okay. All right. Musa. Got Adams and Musa. Probably the next position, I guess, then maybe, as we kind of talked about, maybe the most difficult position for the entire team to fill because there's so much competition, that number 10 spot. Now, obviously, you can go a bunch of different directions depending on who we're looking at as number 10 versus who's a winger and all this other stuff. But do you guys have an idea, maybe a consensus of who you're looking at in the number 10 role?
I agree with Lincoln. I think Malik Tillman will be that guy by then. I keep saying this on the pretense of certain stuff, but I think, he'll get a move by then out of PSG. Probably, I'd say he probably moved to a German club. He kind of screams German club to me. That Netherlands to Germany pipeline, I feel like, is pretty strong. And so I feel like he will probably get a move to a decent Bundesliga side by then, and I think that he'll be the guy. Like we said, the inconsistency of Gio Reyna's career so far, I'm not willing to bet on that right now. And having guys like Gio Reyna and Weston McKennie to be able to come off the bench is going to be a huge threat for the United States that we haven't really had in the past.
Yeah, I think Tillman, especially with how good he's in PSG right now. Yeah. Love got for.
Fair. Is there any consideration, just not necessarily, I don't think he's going to be a starter, but just haven't mentioned his name at all. Where does a guy like a Brendan Aronson fit into this current U.S. team? Not as a starter necessarily, but is he a guy who can expect to at least be in the rotation, kind of off the beaten path at Leeds right now? Was on loan at Union Berlin last year, came back to Leeds, has been inconsistent, with his playing time.
I like Aronson because he can play either the number 10 or put him on the wing if we had to. I think for sure he's not a starter. He's definitely a good kind of tool we can use off the bench for either the number 10 or a winger. If we go to a 4-3-3, play the wing. But yeah, he's kind of like a super sub.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. It's kind of the quarterback theory with me, Chad. If you have two quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. That's kind of how I feel about his positions. It's like he has so many positions that he doesn't even have a position. It's like he's a center mid, attacking mid, winger, but he's not really great at any of them, but he can kind of do all of them. And it's like, I guess if we're since we have 5 subs now, I guess he can be maybe a 5th sub if we need a ton of energy in the 85th minute or something like that, or it's extra time. Imagine as much as he runs, imagine you've been playing for 105 minutes and then frickin' Brendan Aronson starts sprinting at you for the whole second half of extra time. That'd be annoying as hell. So yeah. I think that's kind of his destiny in this current team. I don't think he's as talented as the guys that we've mentioned so far. So I think he's kind of energy guy off the bench for this current national team.
Fair enough. Okay, so we'll move on to the attacking front three, basically. So just to wrap up the team so far, we've got Patrick Schulte in goal, back four of Anthony Robinson, Chris Richards, Miles Robinson, and Serginho Dest. Our double pivot of Adams and Musa, with Malik Tillman sitting in the number 10 spot. now let's move on to the front three. Let's hit the wingers first. Lincoln, who are you thinking would be our two wingers?
Baby Jesus and Tim Weah. In my opinion, I don't think there's really a question with that. I mean, I think those are our two best players. Obviously, Bliss and that Weah. I've got to Weah on Bliss.
Yeah, I
Fair.
100% agree that it has to be Weah Pulisic. I'll give a asterisk to Haji Wright and what's the other dude's name? Jordan Peacock. I'll give an asterisk to those two guys, but I think in a pinch I'd probably say Pulisic and Weah, because I mean Weah, I don't think like technically he's not amazing, but his like pace and the way his pace and power and his directness, like we haven't had a player in a while that's just like, you know what? What's your game? It's like I sprint as hard as I can to the byline and I hit it 1,000 miles an hour across the goal. He kind of reminds me of a certain Lincoln Kickbush when he used to play on the right for Christopher Newport. Those were the days.
Just shoot it across the face.
Those balls were not fun to hit, I'll tell you that much.
I believe it.
Yeah, so I'd definitely say those two as our wingers. Now, I'm interested to see what Lincoln's going to say for our center forward spot, because this has kind of been a place that's been up in limbo really ever since Clint Dempsey started to fall off. Josie Altidore never really had it. Guys like Giassi Zardes and people like that were kind of floating in around it. Then like
Wondolowski,
Wando, and then there was a time when this young group started coming through that it would look like Josh Sargent would be that center forward, or even Peacock, Haji Wright. So now we have two younger guys. I'd be interested to see which of the two Lincoln's going to say is going to be his starting center forward and in 2026.
So this is kind of a hot take, kind of. I'm going to go Pep. And I was very, very excited about Balogun, but he didn't have it done yet. Pepe, I mean, Balogun didn't injure, but Pepe has 9 goals, 13 games. Okay. Netherlands. I mean, I'm going Pepe. I think it's his position to lose. Soft, score 2 goals. Less Balogun for the start. Shit, Monaco.
I actually agree. I think Pepe's going to be the guy. You know, Balogun, he's been okay for Monaco this year. It looks like he's scoring a goal. Not about every other game, but not quite. So just under a goal every other game. So that's not like incredible numbers. Obviously, he's playing in a top 5 league, so that kind of helps him out a little bit. But even like for the national team, like you said, Lincoln, he kind of had a hot start. He had a really good Nations League that this past summer, I think it was, where he first played for the national team, or 2 summers ago.
2 summers ago, yeah.
Two summers ago, Nations League, he was good, and everyone was kind of like, finally, we found our answer. He scored a goal in the final, and not saying he hasn't done anything since. He scored that absolute worldie against Panama, but he hasn't really taken the step forward that we thought he probably was going to. So I agree, Pepe. I mean, especially him and Tillman. Like him and Tillman playing together at club level, even though I kind of predicted, maybe a Tillman move, their understanding with each other, I think, is going to be invaluable. And then again, having Balogun, think of that. Guys that we can bring off the bench. Balogun, McKinney, Aronson, who is the Reyna. And then again, maybe even predicting maybe predicting, a big tournament as a young player for a Kevin Sullivan type of guy. Like those are legitimate options off the bench that we can that can come on and make an impact and change a game. So I'm really, really excited based on this lineup that we have and the attacking subs that we have on the bench. Our defensive depth is scary, but our attacking and midfield depth, I'm quite excited about.
I'm not even that scared about our defense. I mean, like I said, you got Carter Vickers,
You've always been higher on Carter Vickers than me, so.
Yeah, I don't mind him either, to be honest. I don't mind Carter Vickers.
I really don't hate him. One guy that he's
Well, there's also a big difference between not hating him and being like, "Hey, bro, we're about to play against France in the World Cup. Can you like?"
I mean, but you look all right. You got Robinson. That I know that Marcus out nations Mexico, but he started against Jamaica.
Yeah.
Obviously, so I think those are two solid.
Yeah, we got those guys, and then Aaron Long, of course. If we really need it, if we really need another guy.
Shout out Aaron Long, Greg Berhalter. I think it proves our.
Berhalter had a tumultuous run. He had a tumultuous run, that's for sure. Very polarizing figure, even for a U.S. coaching position that, as we said, no one's even been in love with in easily 20 years. So, to conclude our lineup, this is our perfect world 2026, stepping on the field for the first game. Red, white, and blue. The flags are flying. Lincoln's got tears in his eyes. He's definitely at the game, no doubt about it.
Oh, yeah.
This is the lineup that he's seeing. Patrick Schulte in goal. Anthony Robinson at left back. Chris Richards and Miles Robinson as the center back pairing. Serginho Dest at right back. Adams and Musa as the double pivot, with Tillman playing as the number 10. Front three of Pulisic and Weah on the wings, with Ricardo Pepi leading the line. Lincoln, by the way, you must love PSV, man. You must be a huge PSV fan. The way you were talking about both Pepi and Tillman.
I like the pairing. And Tillman's got 9 goals and 4 assists this year. Pepi has 13. So
Yeah.
They already have chemistry. PSV, same data. I just love it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. So we've got our lineup. Now we just need the coach to go out there and win it. Ethan, anything else you wanted to hit on this episode? Or
yeah, I'm looking for a coaching change. I'm already thinking that Poch isn't getting it done. Not winning in Mexico is kind of inexcusable. So no, I'm obviously kidding.
Yeah.
Nothing really particular. I'm really excited. Getting guests on is something that I really, really enjoy that we're able to do, especially Lincoln. Getting guys on talking about what they really, really love. And I feel like it adds a little bit of more dynamism to our episodes rather than just me and Chad, two schmucks talking to each other. We can add a third schmuck now.
Yeah, I'm honored. I'm honored to have gotten the invite to be on.
So Lincoln, 2026 is here. It's July. It's July 15th, 2026. Me and you are on the phone. We're talking about the World Cup. You say, "Hey, E, the World Cup our World Cup performance this year, I would describe it this way." What is your prediction? You will describe the 2026 World Cup in what way?
You asking me to predict what I think will happen?
Predict? You're saying, again, we're on the phone in July of 2026. I'm like, "Hey, Lincoln, what do you think of that World Cup performance overall? What do you think, based on what we know right now, what do you think you're going to say about it?"
I'd like to say excitement, but knowing the U.S. is going to be disappointment. Not get out of the group.
Dang.
But I have faith that we took a huge step with this hire. I mean, when they were looking, I was seeing that Greg Berhalter was coming back. I heard Steve Cherundolo's name thrown out. I was very positively surprised when they hired Poch. So I think that's kind of setting the precedent. So I'm gonna go out here and say we're gonna be very excited how they do. I'm hoping. Never know.
Yeah, that was an interesting time when that coaching hire was being talked about, because on one end it was Greg coming back and Steve Cherundolo, and on the other hand it was like, hey, we also might get Klopp.
Yeah.
And so I guess we landed somewhere in the middle, probably nearer to the Klopp than the Steve Cherundolo with Poch. So yeah, very, very exciting. And man, I really love these specialty episodes. When we did the rebuild with Floyd, when we did got to do national team here with Lincoln. Chad, is there any parting thoughts that you want to say before we take off for episode 18?
No, although I would say look out for Luca Cogliosho. He's a Burnley
Yep.
winger, Italian U21 right now, dual citizen. I think if we could get him in, you talked about the attacking depth we already have. We add another winger who can beat people to the byline. This team could be looking at some serious expectations, so who knows. But as Lincoln said, we all know what'll happen. Go out in the group stage, get 1 point. Poch just ran out of town.
Yeah,
let's all hope this doesn't happen, but if it does, then the three of us at least won't be shocked. So thank you so much for joining us again, Lincoln. Thank you guys all for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Episode 17 of this podcast, and like I said, we are now headed off into episode 18, the Peyton Manning episode. Hope you guys all have a good day. See ya.